This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment mentor for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute, nor is it to convey professional, psychological, financial, or medical advice. If you could use such services, please seek them out from someone you trust. Now here is today's episode. Episode 41. Today's episode is sponsored by Nicole Burgess, Empowerment Mentor. She helps the high-achieving, introverted, and sensitive female entrepreneur end the overwhelm and stressed out cycle, create more balance between her work and personal life, so she can have deeper connections not only with her partner, her children, but herself. Welcome, sisters. In today's episode, I want to talk all about boundaries in your professional life, meaning whether you own your own company, you're an entrepreneur, or you work for somebody else. This is vital for every woman, and especially those who are introverted and or highly sensitive. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because I've had some conversation over these, probably past 6 months or so, and I hear this often in my different services that I provide between the coaching and the psychotherapy about just feeling so overwhelmed, burnt out. And it's a lot of the work that I do with the women in my coaching practice. And what I find, there's this common theme of as we get going in our careers, it can slowly kind of eat away at the boundaries. And what I mean by this is we get going and things are going well, but then we become unaware of how we are doing more and more work and feeling exhausted. So one of the things that I talk to with my clients is having an end of day time. So I know there's various different planners out there, and Mel Robbins is one of them, which I really like, that she has it at, she's got it literally in the planner stating, what time am I going to end? Well, I know for me, depending on the day, I know my end times because that's just a set schedule that I have. And I found probably about a month or two ago, what I was doing was I was getting done with working with my clients, and then I would pull out the computer and I'd work for maybe another hour or more doing some things I was trying to follow up with earlier in the day. And then that made me more exhausted by the time I was ready to go to bed. And it was harder for me to rejuvenate. So what I've consciously done is, okay, these are things I'm going to do at this time of day, each day. And then if I don't get to it at the end of the night because I'm exhausted and I truly need a break, it gets refocused to the next morning. The world's not going to come to an end if I don't get these tasks done, and they really won't. That's step number one. I would invite you to really look at your schedule. If you are working for somebody, and then let's say you're putting in 10, 12-hour days. Now, sometimes I understand you may need to do this in a short-term fashion, but if it's been going on, for weeks and months, it's a clear sign that it's going to end up being burnout. We just can't sustain that. No human being can. So it may be a conversation with your manager about it. It may be a conversation with yourself, letting your employees know that you are going to shift these things a little bit and put a time frame like, okay, every night I'm going to be out of the office by 6, 5, whatever it is for you. If you own your own business, it's the same thing. Really look at your schedule. It's like, are you staying or doing work more mindlessly versus setting yourself up to be laser focused for what you need to do when you're at work? The other thing is take mini breaks. I know for many, many women that they get going on things, especially the high achievers, they get going and they forget to go to the bathroom, which is not good for your body. And I know this may sound silly, but it's very true. You've stopped listening to your body of what it needs, when it needs a break to eat food, when it needs a break to use the restroom. And when we set those mini breaks in there, like every hour, every 2 hours, 5 to 10 minutes, really can help your system, your nervous system, and just taking a deep breath. So if you go up to use the restroom, right, it's like maybe close your eyes, take 10 deep breaths slowly, and then let it out. And you're slowing down your whole system that way, getting back into your body. If you are going to, which you need to, take a lunch, do it away from where you typically sit. So again, if you're working in a cube, get out of the cube. If you're in an office, leave the office for a few minutes. Shifting even the environment can help change things up a little bit and disconnect from that, oh, I've got to get this, and this done. Just allow yourself to be in the moment. The other thing that we need, especially as introverts and highly sensitive, is having that quiet time, that restorative time. So I know I've talked about this before. I know in previous podcast episodes, there's been other of my guests who've talked about this. Whether you're setting that time up, I recommend really in the morning, but also some in the evening. Set some space just for you. And again, if that means you've got to set the timer for 15 minutes where you get up sooner than your family because you got little ones and you've got to get them to school or to the bus stop, whatever, do what works for you, but start that morning with something that really restores your system in the sense that you're setting it with the intention of going in there calmly. Our attitude does make a huge difference for how the day goes. But we also don't need to start our day in a frantic mode, a chaotic mode, because your nervous system's already going to be like wired and fired and tired and all that at the very beginning. And that just kind of gets your day started on a hectic way, and it doesn't need to. Then at the end of the day, what are some of those bedtime routines that you do for yourself? Again, shutting off those electronics at a certain time, turning the lights down, all that stimulation, turning it down so that your brain and you begin to shut down for the day. Which then totally brings me to the electronics. I know this is a huge thing for many, many women. So having good boundaries about when you're going to answer emails, when you're going to go onto Facebook or whatever social media outlet that we can go down that rabbit hole and be on there for an hour like, okay, what just happened? Set some time limits up. I know there are certain apps that you can use to actually not be interrupted, like by the news feed of Facebook and other things like that. There's things that you can set up on your desktop as well. Set some of those things up if you have a habit right now of going in there and getting lost and wasting time doing that because you're avoiding something or you're procrastinating something, feeling overwhelmed. It's like you need that downtime and away from the electronics to truly reset your system too. And I know for many people, there is a tendency, the electronic stuff, how often do you reach for it? Becoming more aware of that can see like there can be an addiction to your electronics. I know I can come home at night and there's times I just turn on TV and I can do that mindlessly. And other times my mind is already so, kind of keyed up about things that I need to turn everything off and have some silence. Become more aware of how often are you on the phone, for what time lengths are you on the phone or using electronics in general, and then having some electronic-free time zones, whether that's an hour on the weekend, an hour at night, a certain time when you go to bed, all electronics are shut off. Do something to set yourself up. And if you've got kids, you're role modeling to them that the electronics are not the priority, your self-care is. If you have employees, I know one thing that comes up that I've worked with when I worked in companies and when I work with some of the professional women that I do, and there's employees that just come in because they're supervisors, managers, executives, and they just pop in because the old adage of the open door policy. What ends up happening though, you get interrupted a lot. And for many introverts, right, we do the deep thinking piece of it. And so you're really processing a lot of information and you may need some chunks of time. So if that's the case where you still want the open door policy, it's notifying your people that, hey, my open door is between these times, but during this time, I have it closed because I need to focus on the top issues of the day or whatever that may be for you. And it's the same thing if you're self-employed. If you have employees that are working for you, you may need to let them know during this hour, unless it's truly a crisis. And when I say a crisis, that means is there a fire, flood, tornado, something like that going on, like, true weather-related crisis that needs to be, it's an emergency, people need to evacuate or do whatever. Or if somebody is truly being hurt or in harm's way, like physically in danger, that I would say is more of a crisis. But having some uninterrupted time will help you be productive, but also not overwhelm and stress yourself out. We have that myth that we can multitask, and all it does is your brain is just switching from one task to another. And then it takes you more time to actually go back to the task you were working on versus just saying, okay, here we go. I'm going to focus on this for 30 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, and then switch to the next thing. If your employees are coming to you often and interrupting and saying, hey, I need help with da-da-da-da-da, one of the simple things, and you may already know this, one of the simple things to do, I remember a boss did this to me when I was first starting out in accounting. He's like, Nicole, you need to come to me with solutions. It was such a novel concept being really young and being in my first accounting job. I'm like, huh? And he's like, yeah, you're coming to me with these problems, but I want you to come to me with some of the solutions. And it helped me switch my thinking. So it can be the same thing for your employees. Ask them to come to you with solutions to the issues that they're working on versus just kind of dump the issue on you like, hey, you need to solve that for me. It's like, nope, you're training them to be, thinkers in this if they're not sure of what to do. The other thing I want you to really kind of challenge, maybe if it's your employees or even your own thinking, is it truly a crisis? So as I said before, unless it's like weather related or somebody is physically being hurt, sometimes people will come to us like, oh my gosh, this is really a big deal. It's a crisis and da-da-da-da-da. If the world's not going to come to an end or nobody's going to be hurt or die from it, then it's probably not a crisis. It's how we're thinking about it. And remembering that someone else's so-called crisis is not your crisis unless you choose to jump on their side of their lane or their sidewalk. It doesn't need to become yours. You can remind them of that too. So one thing I also want you to think about is, like I stated earlier, is really setting aside time maybe for specific boundaries for answering emails or answering phone calls. If we're doing that, every 20 minutes, every hour on the hour type of thing, you're not going to get done what you're wanting to focus on. So having boundaries around that. And again, you can set up automatic email responders that way. Hey, I answer emails between 11 or at 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock for a half hour or so. So I'll respond to you during those times. Or I respond within 24 to 48 hours, whatever that may be. If you have a high-paced job, that may not work for you, but it's really, again, getting curious about not reacting to everything. It really goes back to responding and keeping your nervous system in a calm state versus a high alert, agitated state. Because remember, when we do that, your cortisol levels go up, which is not good for your heart, truly, or any other organs, and you can become more exhausted way before the end of the day because you're at a high cortisol, high alert state, retraining everything to stay more at a calm state. I remember when I used to be a business consultant and I would travel around the world doing software implementations and trainings and all of that. I had a cool group of coworkers that I worked with. And so when we were all on the road, we worked longer hours during the day because we were doing these software implementations. And then at night, we'd go out for dinner, drinks, and have all this time together, which was great for a little bit. And then I started to figure out, I had to go back to like, oh my gosh, as much as I enjoy all this time with them, I chose to let them know that I needed to actually have some downtime myself, which we'd go out, we could sightsee sometimes, depending on how long we were there in the country or the location, but I also needed to have that downtime to recharge. So let me give you a little example of how I used to put some of these things into place when I worked for somebody. So when I was a business consultant many years ago, I worked in a cubicle. And oftentimes I would have colleagues that would come in and sit down and they would want to start chatting with me, not necessarily about the project we were working on, but just about their life. They wanted to connect, which was lovely if I had the downtime to do that. So what I had to do was let people know, again, assert myself, saying, hey, I would love to really talk with you. Unfortunately, I need to get this thing done by such and such a time, so maybe we can catch up later. Most of the time that would totally work with people. They got it. Because if they didn't knock and ask like, hey, is it a good time to chat? And then it was like, let's wait until lunchtime or maybe after work or when we're taking a break, we can chat at that point in time. For other folks who came in, sat down, and they just continued to talk with me, once I set my boundary with them, if they wouldn't leave, then there was times that I would get up from my cubicle and I would leave because I needed to shift that. And I truly wanted to stay in control of my emotions. Like I could feel the frustration. It was like, yeah, it's not worth arguing over this. It's like, I just get up and leave for a little bit, take a stretch, go get some water, come back. And then the person is typically gone. And then I get working again. It can get frustrating if they were repeatedly coming back, but that was very, very low. Somebody would do that with me because I made it clear of what it is that I needed, and they would typically respect that. When we would go travel, and we were all out there as a team, we would travel around doing these software implementations. There were times that, we saw each other at work and then we would go out for dinner and drinks afterwards. And there were some weeks I could totally do that every single night. It was not a big deal. And there was other times I'm like, hey guys, I'm going to skip this one. I just need some downtime for myself or some quiet time. And people understood that. Now there were times I would get teased about it like, oh, come on, you're not being social. And I'm like, you're right. I'm not. I need my own break. So you've got to let people know what it is you need and take care of you. So if I stopped taking care of myself and I got into that people pleasing mode, it's like, okay, well, I want people to like me and I don't want them to think that somehow I'm being rude. Now I'm projecting my stuff onto them. And that doesn't help anybody. And I'm just creating a story in my head. And then the next day I'm more exhausted and tired because I really didn't have the downtime I needed to rejuvenate. So it's okay to advocate for yourself. Again, whether you're working for somebody or you're working for yourself. I remember one time when I was traveling to our local office I'd get up early in the morning and I would go to the gym that was in our building. And then some other people started to use it and come in and then they wanted to chat with me. And again, that was my time in the morning to kind of go about my own internal thinking of what I wanted to do for the day, how things were going, my plans, and it didn't work for me. So what I ended up doing was I would switch hotels, and this other hotel that I would stay in actually had another gym that was connected to it. There was lots of people in there, but I didn't know them. And I'd go in there early in the morning, do my workout. And then when I was done, I was really pumped and ready to go for the day because my thoughts didn't get interrupted by these other people and I didn't know them. Again, I guess I can't really stress enough. You've got to really do what works for you. You are 100% responsible for you and the choices you make. If you're doing the blame game, well, it's because of so-and-so and they do X, Y, and Z. It's like, really take a step back. You can't control their behavior, but you can control what you do and what you think. So this is going to help kind of transition into if you have a family, whether you got little kids, you got teenagers or adult children, letting them know that you've got some times that you're going to be intentionally working at work. And I get if you've got little ones, that's going to be, especially if you're self-employed, you've got to modify that however that truly works for you and your family. But remember, if you're getting so sucked into the work that you're doing and you don't have parameters set around for when you end your work time, that you're missing out on your family and you truly cannot get that time back. Once that time is gone, it's gone. So it's being intentional for when you focus on that work and then when you are intentionally being present with your family as well. Because we know as humans, we need that connection in order for us to truly thrive. And if we allow our work situation, right, we allow our professional life to slowly kind of take away all these other times from us, you end up becoming a workaholic. That doesn't help you, doesn't help your family, doesn't help anybody, right? And then it becomes this ingrained habit, and that's all you're doing. And you can really lose a lot of relationships that way, or really lose that connection with your kids that you really are wanting. Being able to even mark your calendar like, Saturdays are a no work zone, or Sundays are a no work zone, or after this hour, it's a no work zone time, except for the exceptions. And I mean truly exceptions. That's one thing. but it's not the ongoing thing. I know many of these concepts they sound really simple. Many of you are aware of them, I'm sure. And we can also forget. I know I have a tendency to do that. If I'm working on a big project, I can really get sucked into all of a sudden I'm working more hours than I thought. And so I have to be conscious of what parameters I have around my shutting off my work zone and going forward. As I shared before, there was times where I was getting done with sessions and then I started to check into the computer and started working on things for another hour went by, hour and a half went by, 2 hours went by, and that just wasn't conducive to me. So when I became aware of it, then I made a choice to change that. This is not about avoiding things. This is about truly you taking care of yourself and preventing burnout and the resentment that can happen when you're so exhausted that you are not taking the time that you need to for you and doing things that also light you up. Remember, there is no true balance in our life. It's much more about the harmony that you create in the different aspects of your life. Since you're 100% responsible for yourself and the choices that you make, you really can pivot. You really can set some boundaries up with the people that you work with or what you create in your own life regarding your work or who you're working for. It is possible. So I just encourage you to kind of examine your day or your week this week and see where maybe you need to tighten up those boundaries, where you're not in the people-pleasing mode. It's like, hey, you know what? I've kind of let this slide for a little bit and now people are taking advantage of that and I need to go back and remind them, hey, I'm going to do this instead. This is what works for me. And that makes me be more present and a better manager or a better mom or a better friend when I have these things into place. It's also making sure that you are not avoiding or procrastinating things because you don't have boundaries set up. That as you're getting out of your comfort zone or you're trying something new, that instead of taking those small steps to go for it, you're like, I'll do it later. Set those boundaries up so that you can be productive and really thrive in your business and also your home life. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you for listening. Do you want to receive episodes directly to your inbox or stay informed on my latest offerings? Then I invite you to go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/podcast, and there is a button for you to sign up for my newsletter. Thank you again.